to go back and learn Creole, Haitian Creole.
Oh.
And of course, it's because I've realized that speaking some of the local language really is critical. And so I want to make sure that I do that before I get to my next and probably last post, a lesson that I learned. The next mission director going out to Tanzania asked me what was the one thing that I should have done before I got there, and I said, yeah, I should have learned Swahili. So she's doing that now.
They speak Creole in Haiti.
They do.
I hope my CV looks like this one day. I have to work very hard to have that. And what does it take to do this? Because it's a whole lot of work, especially for a woman.
Yes, it is a whole lot of work. There's no doubt about that. In fact, when my sons first visited me here in the Gambia, and they walked into the very beautiful house that the ambassador lives in here in the Gambia, my firstborn son, looked around and he said, so this is what 40 years of really hard work gets you. Looking at the ocean and the swimming pool, and I said, yes. Because when I started in my career, believe me, there was no tennis court and no swimming pool and certainly no ocean. It was a little house in the desert. So when I started my career, it was in a little village in Cameroon, actually. No running water, no electricity, no white face, no one who spoke English. And I learned to love it. But you don't need to live in a fancy place. But when you work really hard, and it's not just working hard, although that's essential, but it's being in love with what you do.
Yeah.
And if you ever find a job that you wake up in the morning, and truthfully, this is true of me, and it's been true of me for years, and I look forward to the day. I look forward to what I can do or change or influence, whether it's one person or one policy, it doesn't make a difference. It's that you can change a little something every day, and those things kind of build up until you actually have done something somewhat significant.
I know you did some journalism as well.
Yes.
And you decided to go into, another field.
Yeah. I loved writing since I was a child, writing all the time, reading all the time. Editor of my high school newspaper, went to journalism school, and then with kind of it was during when I was in high school, it was during the Vietnam War days, and my cousin, who was my favorite cousin, a gorgeous football player cousin, joined the army and went to Vietnam and was shot down. He's alive, but he was shot down, and he came back home and he was in the hospital for weeks. And during the time that I was visiting him in the hospital, a Peace Corps recruiter came to my high school and said, there's a better way of engaging with the world than war, and you can be a Peace Corps volunteer. And I remember going home, I was 17, I remember going home and saying to my father, who was a Marine, the Marine Corps, the toughest of the tough, and saying, Dad, I'm going to be a Peace Corps volunteer. And in whatever that was, 67, I mean, that was like saying you were going to the moon naked or something. And my father said, yeah, right. And I said, no, really, I want to go to Africa. There's a better way. And he's, I don't think so. That's ridiculous. But back in those days, we knew nothing about Africa. We knew there were elephants and, people who dressed funny, and that was kind of it. But I was 17, and when I was 21, I joined the Peace Corps. It never changed my mind.
Yeah.
And
when you got here, you didn't see people, like, when you've never been to Africa and all the stories that you heard, when you came in, it was different.
Very different.
At that time,
wonderful people. Even back
70s.
then, it was, wonderful, yeah. Just great. And my dad said to me, well, okay, if you're so stubborn, and I've always been stubborn, then you go ahead and you join the Peace Corps, which, no one even knew what it was hardly, except JFK had said it was a good idea. And my father was not exactly a Democrat in those days. Anyway, he said, well, you've made a commitment, and then you've got to stay for 2 years no matter what. The people in our family, when we make a commitment, we stick to the commitment. And I said, yes, Dad, I'll stay for 2 years. And he said, well, you understand that, even though it's hard, you'll be far away, you have to stay for 2 years, and on and on. Yes, Dad, yes, Dad. So I left for Africa in August, and in November, my father was on a plane to get me and said, come back home.
And you were serving in the Peace Corps.
Yeah. And I said, what about all that stuff about the 2 years and the commitment and our family? Yeah, well, whatever, he said. You've proven your point. And I said, no, I haven't proven my point yet. So I'm still trying to prove it.
And 1 year, 6 months, it's fast because I
Oh,
remember
wow.
when it was in the newspapers that the Gambia has an ambassador and Pamela Ann White. I never had the opportunity to meet you this close. I've been seeing you at
Right,
state
right,
functions and stuff.
right.
It's really quick. One
Way
year,
too
six
quick.
months.
Way, way too quick.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And you know, it takes a while to build up relationships and trust and understanding in a country. And you don't even know, you know, where the grocery store is or where the minister of finance is or anything else in such a short time. But, you know, I think I have been able to build some very strong, lifelong friendships with many Gambians here that I feel very close to. But Secretary Clinton, when she calls you and she says, I want you to serve in wherever, you know, I mean, Secretary Clinton is one of my heroes. So she could have said, go to Mars, and I would have said yes. And, and so she said Haiti, and I said yes, but it wouldn't have really made a difference. When
And you've never been to Haiti?
I have. I served there for 5 years.
Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah, I just said that.
And but you know, when your country asks you to do something, you do it. That's what we signed up for. In the Foreign Service, you do sign up for worldwide availability.
Okay.
And they pulled me. I remember Tanzania, which was kind of what we call in the Foreign Service Africa light, unlike some of the, you know, Niger is Africa not light, and or Chad. But you know, I was having a wonderful time in Tanzania, Zanzibar and the Serengeti, and beautiful restaurants and raspberries from South Africa. And somebody from Washington called and said, wouldn't you like to go to Liberia? I'm like, oh, geez, I'm having a really good time here in Tanzania. You know, just been to the elephant park or, you know, whatever. And but anyway, I went to Liberia and felt that the talents that I have honed over the years were probably better used in a very difficult environment like Liberia was.
Okay, 1 year, 6 months in the Gambia. You are one of the ambassadors who seem to have a very close relationship with His Excellency the President. I've been watching on TV and seeing you in the newspapers. What is the connection?
We tell the truth to each other.
Yeah.
It's very interesting with President Jammeh because a lot of people seem to think that you can't tell him the truth, so I can't have, you know, intellectual discussions with him or think that something's off limits, but we talk about everything. A couple of weeks ago, he and I talked for 2.5 hours, and we covered soup to nuts. And we agree on some things, we don't agree on some things, but we really respect each other's opinions. And if anyone has the misconception that this president is not well read, is not doesn't have a keen mind, doesn't understand the situation not only in this region but in the world, they are sorely mistaken. The man is extremely well informed. He reads all the time. He watches every news station. He watches more than I do. He's got a memory that remembers the date in 1922 that something happened. Really, phenomenal. And those are just facts. That is just the fact. And although it's, you know, that's true, I think, in a worldview, but in this region, not only does he have a history and a wonderful recollection of what's happening now and why it happened and sort of what led up to it, which is important because you can't solve tomorrow's problems if you don't look at yesterday's events. And he understands that, but he also is very much respected in the region. Presidents of all the countries in this region, and his intervention in Guinea-Bissau and Mali has been very highly valued by the United States and every other country, I think.
And let's now talk on the Gambia-Washington relationship.
Right.
I know it seems to be a very good relationship, but is there anything we can do? In what areas do you think we need to improve on, I mean, both countries?
Right. Well, you know, it was interesting because when I was being briefed to come out here, no one had anything much good to say about the Gambia. It was, you know, well, the journalists disappeared, and there's, you know, human rights, that we wish there was more freedom of speech, and, you know, you just kind of heard this over and over. Until I got here myself and started looking around and digging into the facts and realizing, for example, the Gambia has the highest under 5 vaccination rate in Africa. The Gambia has one of the highest, if not the highest, girls' completion of primary school.